because their stories are good stories. Sometimes what we really need is to hear information that is more specific to us and will positively benefit us. And sometimes it's stuff that we might not expect because we read headlines from across the country and they scare us. So today we're going to speak to Mr. Rob Jennings. He's a mortgage broker and an Atlantic director for a lobbyist organization that works with the government, and we're going to talk about mortgages and rates and rules and all these things as soon as we come back right after this. Welcome back to Out of the Fog. You have probably noticed the last few episodes, I've been spending a lot of time talking about real estate. And that's not just because it's something that I do and helps me feed my daughter and keep my house, but it's also because I personally feel through my experience that there's a lot of misunderstandings of what's going on in our local market because we're forced to sort of be headline readers across the rest of the country, which is how our real estate industry is governed for the most part. So we've talked to local realtors, land development people, builders, talk about all of those things. And now I'd like to talk about the money, because this is important and it's not my greatest strong suit. I mean, I understand it, but I don't know everything. I know, right? And cue somebody who thinks he does. No, I'm joking. Obviously you don't. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Mr. Rob Jennings. Hello, Rob.
Hello, sir.
Thanks for taking the time to come out.
Thank you.
So you are a mortgage broker.
Yes.
Okay. And you know a lot about the finance industry pertaining to debt on houses and how we borrow that money.
That's my job, and I like what I do.
There we go. Okay, so what I like to do for the audience is to give them a little bit of context. Sometimes it can feel a little bit like I'm honking your horn or, you know, pumping your tires or something.
That's okay.
You're okay with that?
Yeah.
But really what it's for is for them to be, the people who are watching, for you guys to be able to say, oh, that's why I should pay attention to what he has to say. Not just because he looks pretty smart in a turtleneck. That is a sharp turtleneck.
Thank you.
You're looking good. You've been a mortgage broker for
11 years.
That's a long time.
Yes.
A long time to do anything, really.
Yes.
Think about it. And you also had to sort of found and start to build a team called Jennings and Associates to manage all of the business that I'm going to go right out and say your skill set and reputation and success rate has created that amount of business, and now it's overflow, right?
That sounds very good. Thank you.
Yeah, but I mean, we're hoping that it's true, and that's why you're here. But also, you're an Atlantic director for an organization that well, you just explain it.
Mortgage Professionals Canada, right? So that is our countrywide association, represents mortgage brokers, and basically represents us with government relations, awareness, marketing, education and events, and it's just our board to lead the association.
So when you say with government conversations, give me an example of how that could manifest.
Well, once again, housing in Canada is huge. It's a huge part of our GDP. It's always in the spotlight. It's always in the headlines, as we're well aware. It's the reason I'm here right now. There's always a lot going on, and the government has a difficult job, to manage this when there are so many uncontrollable parts, right? So they're creating rules, regulations. They're always monitoring. They're always restricting, and we want to, provide input and be proactive as opposed to reactive to some of the decisions that they make, right? So Like I said, there's a lot going on. There was a recent foreign buyers ban, right?
Yes.
The Office of the Superintendent for Financial Institutions are considering additional restrictions to mortgage rules. There's talks of the Bank of Canada increasing the prime lending rate this week as of January 23rd. On Wednesday, there could very well be another slight increase and a 50-50 chance of another one in March. So once again, all of these things are decided by different areas of the government, and we want to be there to help make them make the right decisions.
I'm going to try and take, because you mentioned a handful of things there that I want to talk about and I want to get to, because I think you guys would need to hear this and understand it. Can we start a little bit with kind of a state of the union, like where we are right now? Because everybody's like, we've had 7 or 8 rate increases in a row, which is, it's, from what I understand, sort of historic. Like, it hasn't been like that in a very, very long time. And like, rates are as high now as they were when I bought my first home, and I bought that with 0% down. It was 100% financing. You didn't need any down payment, and it was still only this much interest. Now, granted, the houses cost maybe half as much, or whatever. So, can you give an overview of where the mortgage and home financing industry is now, from your perspective?
Yeah, well, it is very volatile out there. And the reason I say that is because, we're all experiencing inflation, right? Gas is up, groceries is up, lumber, construction, labor costs, everything is up, and everything has been soaring, at a 4-decade rate. That's not good.
Say that again, 4-decade rate.
Yeah, so inflation was at a 4-decade high. We're finally starting to see it come down, okay? But that's not healthy, that everything is this expensive, okay? And the Bank of Canada's, their main mandate is to control inflation. Inflation happened in our real estate markets over COVID, right? Everything just basically soared because demand exceeded supply. And, it's economics 101.
Yeah, and that's really, a lot of people, just when I'm in conversations about buying and selling houses, a lot of people seem to, I'm not going to say that they misunderstand, it's just a little bit of a lack of awareness that the only thing that really ever affects price is supply and demand. If there's too much of something that nobody wants, it gets real cheap. And if there's not enough of something that everybody wants, it gets real expensive. And that's kind of all that affects price.
Yeah. Except for you have this, COVID-induced demand, where everything kind of went crazy. And I think, that happened because of really low interest rates and printing of money. And you can talk all about that. But anyway, here we are in 2023. We've had a couple of incredibly strong years in the real estate markets, particularly across the country, where most major metro markets hit 20% growth back-to-back years. And that was not sustainable and probably not healthy. And now there seems to be a correction, okay? Once again, the inflation caused interest rates to increase 7 consecutive times, potentially a couple more. Interest rates are very, very high, and those rate increases are working. So we're starting to see.
When you say they're working, that implies that it was done with the intention of accomplishing a specific task. What is that task?
Lowering inflation.
Okay.
Normalizing inflation.
Okay, so when you say they're working, you mean inflation is starting to normalize, which means come to a level, because every year inflation it goes up always, effectively, right? But a number at which we can keep pace with. Is that what normalized inflation means?
And there may very well be a new normal to what inflation will look like. And I'm not an economist, but all I can tell you is that, once again, the country is under a lot of pressure economically. There's a lot of things that we can't control globally. So there's a lot of fear, a lot of volatility in the headlines and stuff like that. But I believe, just to get back to your point, Newfoundland's got it pretty good, right? We didn't have that crazy COVID-induced market environment that most other metro markets had. We kind of just chugged along through COVID, and things are forecasted to be pretty flat, pretty good here in 2023. We're actually forecasted to lead the country in real estate appreciation for this year, where most everyone else is plummeting, and no one really knows where the bottom is.
But I think there's a fine line in there to point out, because to lead the country in real estate appreciation,
by depreciating the lease.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Okay. And that's what I wanted to say.
Which is basically hovering around zero.
Exactly.
Right?
So like across Canada, there's a lot of predictions, and we're seeing some year-over-year stuff already. And I've looked at a lot of this data because, like, for a long time I couldn't really do much else, but I wanted to stay like in the know. We're looking at 10 or 12% decrease in average sale price across Canada as an average, and a lot of that comes from your major markets like Vancouver, Toronto, perhaps Montreal. Halifax was in a tough spot for a long time too. Moncton had their run, but here we're only looking at maybe 2%, because we didn't have that massive growth to the same degree. So when you say lead the country in real estate value appreciation, really what that means is we will lose the least.
Yeah, and well, once again, I'm not in the prediction business, but I believe that there's a slow and steady wins the race type of mentality here. We're stable, we're resilient, and once again, it's cheap to buy real estate in Newfoundland, and we're not as rate sensitive. We don't carry as large mortgages as they do in downtown Toronto. We have some of the lowest disposable income to debt ratios in the country, so we don't live check to check. We're not, we have great disposable income, and we get more bang for our buck here.
So you say all of those things from gross data. So like on average, because obviously there are people here that live check to check. Obviously there are people here that have debt issues. Obviously there are people everywhere that are in these situations. But on average, a homeowner in Newfoundland has much more resiliency to fluctuations in real estate values and interest rates, just based
Absolutely.
on the data.
Yeah.
Are we missing a little bit of, and it's not for not being grateful people, I feel, and I'm in the industry, like I speak to people all of the time, I don't think everyone here knows that or is aware of the power behind their actual position.
Well, you know something?
I think that's rare.
A lot of us like to complain. Complain about Newfoundland, complain about the weather, complain about the government. A lot of us are complaining from our $300,000 house with a backyard, a fire pit, a fence, a garage, and $300,000 doesn't get you much in Toronto. You have
doesn't get you anything.
It's a $700,000 condo that's not even 700 square feet, right? So we do have a good, and perspective is very important in situations like that.
So what I'd like to do now is, now I think that the audience has a context for who we are, why we're having these conversations, and a little bit of a state of the union, so that we know where we are. I'd like to take a bit of a break, Rob, and then when we come back, I'd like to get a little bit more tactical about how people can be making decisions moving forward, and maybe an idea of, I know you're not a predictor, but if we could forecast based on some of the major data where we could end up in the coming months. So we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with Mr. Jennings and his turtleneck in a moment. And welcome back to Out of the Fog. All right, Mr. Jennings, I want to get a little bit nitty gritty here, because I think this is the stuff that people are thinking about and concerned about. Interest rates, what different types of rates there are, and how to make the right kind of decisions, because we've got fixed rates and variable rates, which means it doesn't change for the length of your term, or it can, depending on what the government of Canada does with the prime rate. Correct? Mm-hmm. And then we have open and closed terms, meaning it doesn't matter what you do, this is how long you're locked in, or you can get out of this if you want to. Is that a gross oversimplification?
That's fair.
Yeah? Okay. So what are we seeing happening now, And what do we see people wanting to do with their own mortgage products?
So here's the thing about rates, and I talk about this all day, right? But the big thing is, you know, you don't buy a house for the rate, right? You buy a house for the house. You definitely want to get the best rate for your particular situation at that point in time. So that's huge because, once again, when there's volatility, you don't know where you're going to be 2 and 3 or 4 years. You need to make sure you have the right type of mortgage, and it's not just about the rate. There's penalties, there's terms, conditions, there's prepayment options. But right now we're in a unique situation where everybody wants to talk about rate, and there's no, once again, one answer for everybody. We've got variable rates which have increased, 7 times consecutively, which may increase another time or two before we get to the kind of end of the rate hike, before it flattens out, before it starts to decrease. Some are saying end of 23, some are saying early 24. We're even seeing fixed rates start to decrease right now, which is weird. But as inflation kind of settles down, bond yields are settling down, therefore fixed rates are coming down a bit. So once again, everyone's situation is different. Are you buying your first home? Are you buying a forever home? Are you buying an investment property?
Yeah, because if you're going to be in something for 25 years and you're going to pay it off over 25 years, then you're going to stay there until you don't live anymore and don't need somewhere to live. A 3-year term that's a higher interest rate than you want it to be ideally shouldn't be the first decision-making factor on where you're going to spend the next 50 years of your life.
Well, once again, you don't buy a house because of the rate. And the other thing is, for a lot of people when it comes to a mortgage, the only thing they can identify with is the rate. But they don't really know, how does it affect a payment, right? What's the difference between a $250,000 and $260,000 house, and just different things like that. So what we stress to people is not to get too caught up. Some people are going to suffer, right? These interest rate increases are going to hurt some people, and they're not going to be able to get out of it. That's the unfortunate, but that happens all the time, irregardless, right? But for the majority of us, particularly Newfoundlanders who live probably well within their means, it's an inconvenience, right? But you still want to save every dollar you can, right? A penny saved is a penny earned.
But not to belittle it, because yes, it is an inconvenience, but that inconvenience could translate into, now I have to buy this car instead of this one. Now my kid can only play this hockey instead of that one. Or now I got to do this instead of that. Or I got to buy this ketchup instead of that one. So it is an inconvenience, yes, but it's a short-term thing, really? Is that the advice that we're giving people?
Well, when you get a mortgage, you can't control when your mortgage comes up for renewal, right? And once again, you don't want to buy a house because of the rate. So you want to take advantage of the best. In regards to what you're saying about spending, that's what's pushing down inflation. Slowing down spending, slowing down demand, right? And that's what increasing interest rates should hopefully have people do, pick out a lower price catch-up, right? But the big thing about it is people are thinking rates are going up, but right now, fixed rates are going down.
So they're
right?
actually starting to come down.
Yeah, people think that variable rates can soar to the sky, but once again, it can only go so high before the sky starts falling.
If fixed rates are starting to come down, variables can't keep going up. It makes no sense.
Well, this is one of the biggest gaps I've ever seen, fixed being lower than variable, because variable outperforms fixed 95% of the time.
So
right?
To me, it almost feels like if there's the Wizard of Oz is behind the curtain and he's watching the rates and he's pushing the fixed down and hoping more people will take fixed by bringing it down, because if you go variable now, and this is not professional advice, this is just the story I'm telling myself here, because fixed is coming down, get people to take fixed, because if they go variable, in a little while, we're going to see a drop in that more significant than the drop in the fixed. So that's sort of the story that plays out in my head over the next 5 years.
Well, like I said, 5 years is a long time, right? And people are going to have a mortgage or two in that time frame, right? So I just like to step back and say, everyone's situation is different, and not to get too caught up in what your neighbor did or what your colleague did or what your friend says. Just look at your situation and what's best for you.
So what you really need is a clear understanding of your own situation and the advice from somebody like yourself or somebody else on Jennings
let's
of
talk
Associates.
Let's just talk about it.
And make it an individual thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I'd like to move on to something else. You mentioned a recently enacted foreign buyers ban. And I'm aware of this. People all over Canada are aware of it. I don't think a lot of people locally talk about it. And I think it's way bigger locally than we expect, because it really only applies to like within a half hour or so of St. John's in some ways. But that's going to have a bigger effect than people expect, I think.
Well, the timing was really curious. You know, it was announced December 22nd, right before Christmas. It was effective January 1st. It was kind of thrown at us really quickly. And a lot of us probably don't think about, you know, foreign buyers, but I've had a number of conversations with foreign buyers, with new Canadians, with immigrants. And it is unfortunate because I understand why the government wants to restrict this, people not in Canada, purchasing real estate in Canada as a way of just for investment purposes. There are cities that have a ton of foreign investments or foreign buyers purchasing real estate and even leaving it vacant just because it's better to have their money in our country than wherever they're from.
So like if I was like a wealthy multi-billionaire and I lived like in a communist country somewhere and I needed to do something with my money, or it was just going to be taken because that's the life that I live and that's the society that I live in, I could buy 100 units in a brand new condo building in Toronto, and at least I know my money's safe there. Nobody needs to live there.
Something tangible, absolutely. But, you know, so there's a lot of
trying to stop
Yeah,
that.
there's a lot of different people this affects, but we feel that it's affected some of the wrong people. You know, we've got new Canadians here that went to university here that have, you know, professional jobs, new entry-level jobs here, people that want to, you know, plant their roots here, and now all of a sudden they can't purchase a home until they've been working full-time and have had 3 years tax returns, and we think that's
And
silly.
they've already been here for 6 or 7 years.
Yeah, you know, so once again, that's just something that we want to do. We had to add input and say, hey, you know, good idea, good intentions, but you know, you targeted some of the wrong people. You
So
know?
is this one of the many problems with the fact that that industry is governed federally, and there's so many, because real estate is only ever a local thing, always. But this finance industry and the Bank of Canada and these, who do you say, the Office of Superintendent of Financial something?
Institutions.
I was so close. I missed the last one.
That counts.
They're making national decisions. They don't have the micro context. So, and it's a big problem here because we're quickly aging. I believe you told me that I think it was you, that without immigration, we're literally dying. Yeah. Like we don't have enough people here to keep us afloat.
Yeah, our birth rate is less than our, you know, death rate, and immigration actually recently kept us in an increasing population number, which once again is going to be hard going forward. And we've got a great immigration plan, you know. So you're right, you know, rules have to be made, and you know, we have to live within those rules, but we just want to make those rules as right as possible, you know. And the same goes for the OSFI, if you want to call them that. It's a little easier.
It's a little easier.
Once again, they are looking at increasing the stress tests. They're looking at lowering debt service ratios, and they're looking.
So can we quickly define some of those things?
How much you make versus how much you owe.
That's your debt service.
Debt service ratio is one way of putting it. Stress test is if your mortgage rate is here, you have to qualify for a mortgage up here.
Because if something happens at this lower rate, you're protected.
It's a buffer, absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's protected a lot of Canadians now,
we also have to put cash into our houses that also protects us.
That's right, yeah.
So the government really hasn't done a bad job. Like if you go back to the States a few years ago, I mean, they made movies about it, about how upside down, like we haven't had that problem.
No, listen, but to make these rules in 2023 is a little late to the party, right? I mean, we just had 3 years of a COVID-induced real estate boom, right? So you don't want to overcorrect now, right? And I believe in regulation and restriction, and you know, you have to earn home ownership, right? But for some people, it's going to be impossible, right? And for some of the wrong reasons, like the foreign buyers ban, right? So it's just a matter of, you know, having these conversations, you know, as an association to hear stories. You know, what we're collecting now is stories and saying, hey, this is how this affects me. And once again, we just want, you know, everyone to have a shot at home ownership. And, you know, once again, selfishly, I believe that's easier to do here in Newfoundland, but we once again have to go by the rules they set in Ottawa, right?
So in my mind, if I'm thinking about the people that right now need to have the most one-on-one conversation about their circumstance. To me, it's the people who are coming up for renewal, who have rates in the 2s, that I think they're in a hard spot potentially, and people who want to buy now who are afraid of rates.
Yeah, yeah, that's probably a good a good point for sure.
Okay, so
what I basically said, Jason, was anybody who's thinking mortgage in 23, you know, whether it be, you know, in March or November, you know, my only advice is to think about it early, to have conversations about it early, to get a couple of opinions and be proactive as opposed to reactive, because you really don't know where you stand until you have a good chat about it and run some numbers.
Rob, thank you very, very much. I mean, we just went through 20-something minutes real fast. And you made all of these numbers actually sound interesting to me. So I hope that's true for the audience also. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, quick break, right back, and I'm going to give you some advice on how to reach out to Rob or someone like myself to help have these conversations. We'll be right back. Okay, welcome back. The point of all of this is to demonstrate to you that you are possibly in a better position than you thought you were, and to also let you know that there are people out there that can provide information, not take anything from you, not make money off of you, but provide information to help you make good decisions. I neglected to get Rob's contact information out here. However, mine is readily available. So reach out to me. I will direct you straight off. I would love to. Thank you very much for watching and supporting us, and we'll see you next time.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
If you have a comment about this program, we'd love to hear it. Email or call us, or send us your feedback through social media.
We can be hurt. We can be bruised. We can be broken. Slowed down, confused, and even numbed.